All right, buckle up because we are about to unpack a really provocative analysis of one of history's most iconic figures. But trust me, this is probably not the take you're expecting. So the source material for this explainer, it just gets right to it. It asks this really stark question. Was Jesus the savior he's claimed to be, or was he something else? A very naughty boy. I mean, what a bold, kind of cheeky way to start, right? It really sets the stage for a pretty wild character breakdown. Okay, so right up front, let's be super clear about something. This analysis, it's not about faith. It's not about religion. It's treating Jesus as a character in a story. Think of him almost like a superhero figure whose performance, whose psychology, whose whole mission can be broken down based on, the stories we've all heard.
So where does this analysis even start? Well, it basically puts this character on a trial stand, you could say. And it begins with a deep dive into his psychology. The thinking is, hey, if we're going to understand his actions, we've got to try to get inside his head first.
The first thing that's put on the table is a potential diagnosis, the Messiah complex. And this isn't just about having a big ego, right? It's a real psychological state where a person genuinely, truly believes they are destined to be a savior. The theory here is that Jesus, after he left home and went into the wilderness, he developed this powerful, just all-consuming belief. And here's where it gets really interesting. The author of this analysis shares this super personal story. He admits that he had this same kind of impulse when he was young. He even tried to raise his own son to be a Messiah. He looks back on it now and says it's absolutely laughable, calling it a way that our DNA kind of hijacks the mind to make us procreate. It's just, wow, what a modern parallel to this ancient story. Okay, so if we look at Jesus' whole mission like it's a job, well, this analysis gives him a pretty tough performance review. It points to some huge mistakes, like poor recruitment. He didn't really screen his disciples, and you know how that ended. A real lack of discernment. He didn't even rest up before a massive confrontation. And of course, the big one, totally losing his cool and smashing up the temple. The point here is that these don't look like the moves of a calm, calculated leader. It looks more like someone who's just completely overwhelmed.
All right, so after looking at the psychology, the analysis moves on to deconstruct one of the biggest, most foundational stories of all, his origin story.
So what we have here are two very different stories. You've got the traditional one we all know, but then there's this alternative theory from the source. It suggests that Mary actually had an affair with a Roman centurion, and in this version, the whole Immaculate Conception story was a cover-up to save her life, because being stoned to death was a very, very real possibility. I mean, the implications of that are just massive. It turns this divine miracle into a deeply human act of survival. And it could even explain why some sources suggested Jesus looked and sounded different, like an outsider.
But look, this analysis isn't all about failures. It actually points to a really critical turning point for the character, a moment of huge growth that, according to this view, holds his most important teaching.
So first, you have that scene in the temple. The analysis calls this the moment he got triggered. He sees all the corruption, and he loses control completely. So in this view, it wasn't some righteous, planned-out act. It was a raw, angry outburst that, let's be honest, set him on a direct path to his own demise. But then, at the very end, you get a total 180. He's on the cross, and instead of being angry or cursing the people who put him there, he asks for them to be forgiven. The analysis calls this his master strategy. It's this incredible shift from pure rage to this deep, powerful understanding.
So what's the big deal about this shift? Well, the analysis sees it as this huge course correction. It's like, in that final moment, Jesus has this realization that the people hurting him aren't evil. They're just not well. They literally don't get what they're doing. And for the person who wrote this analysis, that moment of recovery, that is his most profound teaching.
But here's the thing. Even with that powerful moment of personal growth, it doesn't save his overall mission, according to this viewpoint. And this is where the analysis delivers its biggest, most philosophical critique. The whole argument hangs on this idea of two kinds of problems. Think of it like a river. You have downstream problems. These are the symptoms you see, like injustice, corruption, violence. The analysis argues that this is what Jesus focused on his entire life. But then, there's the upstream problem, the source of the river itself. And in this case, that's the very act of creating life in the first place, which is the source of all suffering. And this, right here, is the absolute core of the critique. The idea is that a true Messiah would have gone upstream, because fixing downstream problems, it's like bailing water out of a sinking ship but never bothering to plug the hole.
The argument is that Jesus spent his whole life just bailing water, and he completely missed the actual hole in the ship, the real root cause of all suffering, which is just being born. So all of this leads to a pretty blunt final verdict on the character of Jesus and a totally radical new definition of what it even means to be a savior. So what's the bottom line here? The final judgment from this source is, no, he was not the Messiah. He was a guy with good intentions for sure, but ultimately confused, a very naughty boy who, even with a good heart, just didn't get the real problem he was trying to solve.
So, if he had understood this upstream problem, what would his main message have been? Well, on this point, the analysis is crystal clear. The ultimate commandment shouldn't have been about loving your neighbor. It should have been, thou shalt not greed. The idea being, the only way to truly, finally end suffering is to just stop creating it in the first place.
And this leads to a really startling conclusion. I mean, think about it. If the goal is to save people from suffering, then what's the most effective way to do that? Well, it's to not bring them into a world of suffering. In this really radical view, anyone who makes the choice not to have children is, in a way, performing the ultimate messianic act. They are the real saviors.
And that's where this whole analysis leaves us, with a question that's, frankly, pretty challenging. It's the idea that gets to the absolute heart of this entire argument. Could saving someone actually mean preventing them from ever existing in the first place? It's a huge, provocative thought, and definitely something to chew on.